So what happened in the pandemic was we decided to be a COVID testing and treatment site. And we were a primary care clinic. So everyone said, oh, how are you going to do that? It's so expensive. All the PPE is so expensive. Big hospitals, you need to have all those resources. I said, no, you don't need to.
Welcome to Give a Heck. I am your host, Dwight Heck, and for much of my life, lived my life in quiet desperation, wondering how I was going to pay the bills, take vacations, save for retirement, and one day wondering if I would get off the hamster wheel of life and have purpose. A life that most of society lives, which takes us to work, then home, then repeat, and pays us hopefully enough just to survive. The harsh truth that most live with more month than money and have no idea how to live life on purpose, not by accident. This ensures the mass majority are living not just financially broke, however emotionally and mentally as well due to financial pressures. In each episode, I will introduce you to thoughts, ideas, and guests that can help you to learn how you too can live life on purpose, not by accident. Good day, and welcome to Give a Heck. On today's show, I welcome Dr. Ravi Iyer. Born in Mumbai, Ravi is a founding physician and president of Iyer Clinic LMG in Fairfax and Loudoun County, Virginia, USA, and serves as the director of a clinical research for Loudoun Medical Group. A physician, scientist, inventor, and entrepreneur with research publications in the mechanisms of gene controls and several patents on human and veterinary medicines and devices, Dr. Iyer serves as CEO of Active Power Inc., a nutrition and wellness company he founded. A transdisciplinary polymath born in Mumbai and raised in Eastern India, life has taken the doctor from medical colleges on the banks of the Ganges, where he would swim each morning before heading to his lectures, to a rarefied ivory towers of academia as a scientist and postdoctoral fellow at Harvard Medical School and Massachusetts General Hospital's Cancer Center. His life experiences include a 9-year directorship of hospice caring for dying patients, a 4-year chairmanship of a 225-bed hospital, voted a top doctor award-winning medical practice from 2013 to 2023, and a director of clinical research for a 300-physician medical group. The doctor's essays, articles, and writings focus on the intersection and interactions of social events with people as metrics of health in a society. His extensive background of over 40 years in the fields of medicine, science, basic research, drug regulation and vaccine development, and deep insight into the human condition puts him in a unique position to speak about these issues with clarity, incisive depth, and deep compassion. His passion is educating and advocating for a balanced understanding and stewardship of our life and world in a manner that allows for all around growth and health for all creatures and populations. I'd like to welcome you to the show, Ravi. Thanks so much for agreeing to come on and share with us some of your life journey.
Thank you. Look forward, Doug. It was a pleasure to come on. So
yes,
forward to our conversation.
Yeah, myself included. So let's get going. One of the things I focus on, as I mentioned, and for those that are new to listening or watching to the show, I focus on a person's origin story from their earliest recollections of what they're willing to share. I find it makes it a better conversation when we know a little bit more about a person that is outside of their business or their career or what they have accomplished. So Ravi, please tell me your origin story and what key things from your childhood to adulthood have led you to where you're at currently.
I was born in Mumbai, but I was brought up, and my earliest memories are those of my hometown in Jamshedpur, a town on eastern India. It's a town very much like Pittsburgh in the US. It's a steel town. The main dominant industry is the steel industry and the automotive factories of Tata companies. And my father worked there, so I used to go to the school there. So it was run by a bunch of nurses, a bunch of nuns from Philadelphia called the Sisters of Mercy. And so my earliest recollections is going to school there. It was a happy time. The school is a great school, had some great friends, played around. But I was always more of a bit of a solitary pursuit kind of guy. I would play with the rest of the guys, but I would often strike out on my own, go to the woods behind the school. There were creeks and small ponds where I would take a piece of cloth and fish and catch some tadpoles, catch some zebrafish, bring them home, put them in a small mason jar with water, and we'll watch them and catch. So that's what brought me deeper and deeper into attraction towards biology, and it became a natural progression very early on. I was about, I think, 11 or 12 years old when I decided I want to be a physician. So because I was fascinated by the way life worked. And that has been my driving passion all my life. How does life work? And how does life live? And how do you help life live? That is essentially the focus of my entire life. Even though I have done a vast variety of things, they are all focused on only one thing: how does life work?
That's awesome. That's the basics of life. People don't care to understand, let alone understanding like what's life mean more than the fact of just getting up, going to work, go home, get paid and start the next day again, and they just keep on going on that hamster wheel of life. You're more interested in understanding the integral things that make life tick. And from reading up on you yesterday when I was preparing for this conversation, I came across the term polymath. And I had heard of that term before, but I'm the type of person that wants to know. So I actually looked it up and thought, that would be a great question to ask. So again, I never really understood it till I Googled it yesterday, Dr. Google, go find out some information. Not that it's always accurate, but I read up a little bit. So I'm curious, your primary subject is medical, right? So what created your desire to learn and become proficient in other areas and become a person who can be thought of as a polymath?
I didn't. The funny thing about being a polymath is not that you plan on being it; you just become one, and you become one by following a singular passion. And for me, my singular passion is all things living. So, that is what brought me to being a physician. And then when I got my medical degree, I decided that I wanted to deal more and more into, in India, infectious disease is a big problem. And I was tired of seeing my patients die of tuberculosis and leprosy. So I decided to study why is it that the body is unable to fight some infections, and other infections it can fight off very well. And even in tuberculosis and leprosy, there were always a few patients who were able to eradicate the disease in their body, whereas the vast majority of patients could not. So my question was, what was so unique in these few rare cases where the patient would get infected with leprosy, but was able to eradicate it, or would get infected with tuberculosis and was able to eradicate it, whereas the majority of patients who got infected with either organism could not. So that led me to getting a doctoral degree in biochemistry and molecular biology, where my work was in that. And then when I was presenting that landed me a fellowship at Harvard, where I I did the work on understanding what regulates genes that are turned on during infection, and how does the control elements of these genes work. And that led me to my next stage of my life, where I landed a residency position in George Washington and got a license as a physician. And while I was training in George Washington, the kind of work I was doing with patients there led me to see that there was a huge gap, that American medicine was focused entirely on high-level interventions, where we would spend a lot of dollars and technology in saving a few people, but there was a huge gap in the vast number of ordinary preventative care medicine in the community level. And also there was a huge gap in elder care. So that pushed me on to becoming a primary community physician. And that then brought me to a stage where I was a director of a hospice, taking care of dying patients. And from there, I became a chairman of a hospital. So 40 years, it's been a progression at every point, following what makes life, what are the driving forces of why problems are problems, and what can we do to understand that. And while I was doing all this, I happened to get my mother was visiting me once, and she was complaining of knee pain that was keeping up at night, and she could not tolerate ibuprofen. So because I had my chemistry knowledge, I compounded a liniment in my kitchen using herbs and spices. I extracted their essence and made a liniment, and that produced a benefit. That became very popular in the clinic, and I filed a patent for it, and then that patent then got an FDA approval as a drug. And then one of my dogs got injured, and the same liniment, I modified it for using dogs, so then it became a veterinary medicine. So at every point, there was always a biological problem, and I addressed it using whatever tools I had either at my disposal, or I went out and learned those tools. I went out and acquired a command of those tools. And then when the medicines I made for both humans and dogs became popular, a couple of people I knew convinced me that I should start a company. So they joined with me, and we formed a company, and that is now doing reasonably well as Active Power Incorporated. And in this way, I became a polymath. It's not it's not like I got up in the morning and said, I'm going to become a polymath. My polymath qualities of acquisition of knowledge in the pharmaceutical, setting up of manufacturing facilities, understanding regulatory guidelines, understanding how vaccines are made, understanding how immunology works, understanding research, understanding primary care, understanding how hospitals will work, how to deliver medicine at the community level, as well as the institutional level, understanding how end-of-life care works. All of this is driven out of a single passion, and that is, how does life work? And how do you make life work when life does not work? See, every time a patient comes to me, he's not coming to me to fix a disease. He's coming to me to help him live better. There is something that's happening today in his life that is preventing him from enjoying life the way he wants to enjoy it. And he's coming to me and saying, Doc, how can you make me live better? And I just use my tools to find a way where either I remove the problem, or if that problem cannot be removed, I try to reduce its intensity, or if its intensity is not capable of being reduced, then I teach him how to live with it. One of these three things happen. And that's what makes me who I am.
That's amazing, because a word keeps on popping into my head, because I've been told I'm the same thing, and many of my guests are this way. They're tenacious. They're people that are always on the climb to learn and advance their knowledge and being
Yes.
able to serve others. You start out, right, wanting to help somebody, can't help them at the level that you're at, and you don't sit back or pass the buck. You go and you're tenacious, you figure it out. And I find the most successful people in life that serve humanity, or not even just humanity, serving animals, because you have that desire as well. As you've mentioned, with your ointment for humans, you've figured it out how to help it out for animals. You're a very compassionate person that's always on a climb to wanting to learn. Like you said, you either use the tools that are available, and if there's nothing available, you're going to learn how to figure it out, because people, either you're going to be able to help them by finding a solution to cure them, or you're going to help them live with it. Either way, you're a tenacious person, and you do care about people. That's quite evident. So I appreciate you sharing that. Like, how does life work? Well, life works if you work it too, though, and you're that type of person that's working your own life so that you can help others understand and learn how to live a better life themselves. Everything that I stand for, right? Give a heck, how to live life on purpose, not by accident, takes people like you. So I appreciate you. Thank you so much. So, Ravi, you are a physician, scientist, inventor, entrepreneur. You have publications in regards to research publications in regards to mechanisms of gene control, several patents on human and veterinary medicines. You did discuss a couple things, one of them being that ointment that you started out with your mom. Like, she's blessed to have you as she's blessed to have you as her son. And you founded that company you talked about, Active Power, because of that. You're just constantly on the climb to help people. Can you share with us any other things that because you've mentioned about the fact of medicines and stuff? Is there anything else that we would know of in the general public that you've helped create, or are you looking at something that will become something that's more of a global nature that you're working on with your company?
So Active Power, Active Power's has a slogan. It's called "Power Your Possible." The thing about, see, I have on my Facebook page, I have a statement below my profile. It says, there's only one reason for life. Believe that you can contribute to people and work to find a way to do it. There is only one reason for life, and that is empowerment. Everything you do comes from that. And you live to empower people, and in the process, you get empowered in the process of doing that. When that becomes your raison d'etre of your life, then what happens is things fall into place to enable that to happen. And then from that point onwards, whether something grows to become a massive enterprise or not is irrelevant, because while that is always nice, that is not the primary driving force. The primary driving force is, how do you contribute to people? And I tell my staff that my clinic will work as long as it serves a purpose to the community, and the day it doesn't serve any more purpose, it will die. And that is like the way it should be in nature. Nature, the forests, the trees in the forest, when they stop serving their purpose, they become deadfalls. They just fall over. That's the way it is going to be, and that's perfectly fine with me. The one thing, a lot of people, they they talk about how they can live their life purposefully, but they approach it as if it is a grind, as if they have to struggle to get it. I don't. For me, purpose is like the way I breathe. It is not a grind to breathe. It is your existence. If I see somebody and I'm in a position to help, I'll help. If I'm not, I will stand there and watch. But either way, my purpose is not a burden on my shoulders. I don't know if I'm making myself clear on that, but that is where I am.
It's not a grind. It's something that it's your life. It's your existence.
Exactly.
It's like breathing. It's who you are. It's ingrained in you to serve and help people and always be on the climb. You talked about, and you mentioned, how do you contribute to people? Not enough of us on this planet think that way, though. We're always self-serving. We're not necessarily serving. Our purpose isn't focused on helping others, right? So your focus is more that way.
That is because people look at their life in an us versus them equation. And the reason they do that is the vast majority of people in the world, they look at life as if the things that they want in their life is perpetually in shortage. They think that if they don't grab it, it'll get lost. It'll be taken away by somebody else, that it will go away, it'll disappear, it'll decay, or somehow no longer be available for them. And the reason they think that is because they think that the things that they want in their life are physical objects that occupy actual position in space and time. And because they think that the things that they desire are physical objects bounded by space and time, they live what I call the not enough life. Not enough love, not enough friends, not enough money, not enough time, not enough health, not enough wealth, not enough, freedom. You can name it. It's always not enough, not enough, not enough. And in this not enough life, they have to hustle. They have to snatch it away. They have to, and they are brought up in a culture that of not enough, that teaches them that rewards that there is a first place and there is a second place and everyone else all the way to the last place. And the last place is the person who doesn't get any of the things that the first place gets in, and so on and so forth. And that is a very Newtonian way of thinking, a cause effect. It is not a quantum way of looking at life. Now, in reality, if you look at the most successful people, they do not work, they do not operate on the principle that life is, that there's a shortage of resources. In fact, what they believe and what they live is that their only real resource is their relationship with the things that they interact with. So, for example, my relationship with the things that are important to my life is more important than the presence of each of those items in my life. Like, my relationship with my idea of wealth and money is more important than the actual presence of the dollar bill in my wallet. My relationship with how I have friends and family is more important than the physical presence of friends and family around me. To have a relationship with that, you have to have first a relationship with yourself. Most successful people work on maintaining their relationship with the resources that they need in their life. And they help other people around them also maintain strong relationships with their resources. And in this way, what happens is the entire universe becomes their resource. They move from collecting resources to becoming resourceful. When you're resourceful, even a blade of grass becomes a weapon for you. You can make do with anything. Anything in front of you, you will turn it around to your advantage, because you have resourcefulness, and because you're resourceful, you become full of resources. See, people think that resources are objects like to be acquired and inherited and passed around between themselves. Resourceful people create things. They don't have to inherit anything. I'll give you another example. When I was in college, in medical college, I had a set of notes on endocrinology that were very well coveted. And it was the best notes on endocrinology, and I used to teach people. So there was one student who would always be very rude and very dismissive to me. And one day he came and asked me if he could borrow my notes of endocrinology. And I refused. I said, no, I'm not going to give it to you. Why? Because you don't respect me. And therefore, the product of my mind is not for your consumption.
Yeah.
Yeah. He was much bigger and he threatened me physically. I said, listen, I don't think you get the idea of what it means to be an owner. Let me explain this to you. And I took these notes were handwritten notes. I took the notes and held it up in front of him and set fire to it in front of him. I said, and he said, what are you doing? He says, you know, you don't understand what it means to own something. I am the creator of these notes, and therefore I can destroy it because I can always create it again.
Confidence too.
You have no capacity to create, and your consumption is dependent only on fear. And guess what? You are not going to get this because I say no. People don't understand what resourcefulness is. When you are resourceful, you automatically become full of resources. There is no need for you to go snatch it away, fight, compete. And that brings me to the next point. I often tell another favorite statement I make is excellence never competes. The level just below excellence competes. When you reach at the pinnacle, you don't compete anymore because there's nothing left to compete. You only are excellent for your own being. And you just are excellent just as a manifestation of yourself. Everyone else below excellence competes. You compete on the way to the pinnacle of excellence. You never compete once you reach excellence. So excellence never competes. So, and this is something that people have a hard time comprehending. They mix up the pursuit of excellence with the acquisition of excellence. A person, when he's being excellent, is not focusing on excellence at all. He's just focusing on being himself and performing and executing with diligence in consistent alignment with a vision and a purpose. And other people stand outside of that performance, look at that performance and say, that is excellence. That is Michael Jordan. That is Wayne Gretzky. And they say, that is excellence. Wayne Gretzky is never saying excellence. Michael Jordan doesn't say excellence. The people looking from the sidelines say that is excellence. It's always on another person's opinion.
But it all ties back to what you were saying, resourcefulness. I like how you put that. Like, I'm quite familiar, obviously, it's Wayne Gretzky. Wayne Gretzky won all his cups in my city where I live. I've seen Wayne Gretzky when he still played. I've seen him play even before he hit the NHL. But Wayne, though, he'd be the type of people would say, oh, he's so lucky, or look at, he's so naturally gifted. But they never seen behind the scenes the fact that in off season, he was spending every single day practicing, skating, stick handling. He was doing, if he seen a weakness, he was studying game day film. He was studying where he could become better. And if he didn't know, he was finding a coach to help him with that weakness of his area so he could strengthen his game. And people would, I used to hear, oh, Wayne's getting better and better as he ages. Yeah, he's getting better and better because his resourcefulness, his ability to tap into himself and become the resource he needs by bringing in other people or putting more effort in or getting him where he's at. That's why I laugh when people say that person's so lucky. To me, luck is a loser's excuse for a winner's completion. And that's a statement that's a statement that a famous friend of mine, I wouldn't say friend, pardon me, acquaintance, seen him speak that on the stage in the US at a conference in 1993. That's a few years ago. He said, it was on stage, and he said, you know what? I want everybody to listen to what I'm going to say. And the whole room got quiet. There was 20-some thousand of us in this facility in Salt Lake City. He said, luck is a loser's excuse for a winner's completion. And you could hear a pin drop, Ravi. And then he said it again. Did you guys hear me? Luck is a loser's excuse for a winner's completion. Luck doesn't exist. Preparation exists. Opportunity, reset, being willing to fail, willing to understand that failure is a stepping stone to success. That, so I bring this up because you talk about resourcefulness. I look at the world today and who controls the world's wealth and who are the smartest and most capable people that are helping humankind, right? Helping out the world. They're very resourceful people. The people that are, like, when you look at wealth on a large scale, there's very few, it's not even less, it's less than 1% of the world's population that's wealthy, and they're out making a difference, not always in a good way. Some people are making a difference in a bad way. But the key thing is what you said, that word, resourcefulness. They're not looking for other people to give them what they need. As you mentioned, if there was something that you wasn't there, you went to the next step. That's back to the polymorph, what we were talking about. You went to that next step, that next want to be better. And if you didn't know it, I'm sure you probably reached out to people and had conversations, or maybe you belonged to a mastermind of people where you could bounce ideas off, but you did whatever it took to, like you said.
We did that during the pandemic. I describe it in the Reaper's Dance. So what happened in the pandemic was we decided to be a COVID testing and treatment site. And we were a primary care clinic. So everyone said, oh, how are you going to do that? It's so expensive. All the PPE is so expensive. Big hospitals, you need to have all those resources. I said, no, you don't need to. The minute that it was obvious, before the markets shut down, I ordered 3M respirators. And they said, how do you know that these respirators work? I said, yeah, these respirators work because these respirators are used for painters to prevent them from inhaling paint vapor. So believe me, it'll block a virus too, so it'll work. So you can wear this and you just use this. And then I said, so what if there's no expensive gowns? Guess what? You have snow pants and wind cheaters that you can wear, and they are easily disinfectable, but you just spray some disinfectant. So what if there's no Lysol and Clorox available? Did you know that swimming pool disinfectant is available in the concentrate by the gallon? Just buy 2 gallons of it, and since it's concentrated to use it for swimming pools, 1 gallon lasts me 2 years. So we used that. We didn't have Lysol.
Resourcefulness again.
Resourceful. Yeah,
I love it.
That.
I love it.
So that's what we did.
But there's not enough people out there though, like yourself, that are just you know, that's the same as me, though. It goes back to that word, tenacious. People will tell me you can't do this or can't do that, and I'd look at them and go, "Watch me." All right,
hold my beer.
Yeah, I'd say, yeah, here, hold my beer. And at the end of the day, I'd say, "Watch me." Well, sometimes in my brain, it took me years. That's when I was in my early 20s. It took me a while my brain would be going, "Why are you saying that? You don't know what you're doing. You haven't figured it out yet." Well, guess what? I did figure it out. I went through that trials, that tribulations. I stubbed my toe. I fell down. I scraped my knee. I just kept on getting back up. And if I couldn't figure it out on my own, I brought great people around me. Like you said, you got people together and you found things that you could utilize, like pool chlorine. Like most people don't understand how effective chlorine can be. You just utilize the fact of just general knowledge. Like I know what you're talking about with a respirator because I have friends that own Body Shop. My own brother-in-law is a body man, and those respirators, they pretty much like they're like having an N100 mask. Nothing's getting through, right?
Yeah, that's all. You said something that brought up a childhood memory of mine. When I was a kid, I was a small kid. So there was this bigger guy, and we got into a friendly wrestling match. And he was so good at throwing me down. So every time I would engage with him, we would grapple, and barely 3 seconds into it, he would flip me around and bang, I'm on my back. And every time I would get up, I'd shake myself up. I said, let's do this again. He must have tossed me to the ground about 50 times. And every time I got up, he finally gave up. I couldn't beat him, but he got tired of throwing me to the ground. And I walked away feeling, hey, I beat him because he couldn't keep me down.
Your resolve was higher than his, though.
He couldn't keep me down. But that memory, I never forgot. It told me something about myself. I learned something about myself in that event, that I just don't give up. I never give up. Later, when I was in college, I ruined my academics 1 year to the point where I almost failed, and I could barely get admission into a good university. I had to go to a third-rate university and work myself up from there to medical school and into the best institution. But it took me 9 years to climb out of that academic hole. And but once I got started, I didn't look back. And so that is a very essential feature of my personality. I don't give up.
You have my superpower. You know what my superpower is? People laugh at me. I've done talks on this. Tenacity is a superpower, in my opinion.
Yes.
The most successful people in my life, I look back when I was a young boy, and I grew up in a farming community at the time when I was growing up, it was only 10,000 people. My dad owned a farm equipment dealership, and people would say, like, whispers around the community, because it's not a very big community, but he was one of the pillars of the community, one of the successful people. Like back to that luck thing I talked about. And it wasn't luck. As a young boy, I had to start working for my father in the summers. I was 12, 13, I'd say. And I watched my dad. He was tenacious. If there was something, a farmer would come in with a circumstance or an issue with a piece of equipment, or they would talk about their crop or whatever. My dad may not have known the knowledge, but he would find it. He was resourcefulness.
My dad was like that too.
He would go out and find out that information. But you know what? He would always share it. He didn't hold it at hostage like some people do. They hold things at hostage. And I'm not against people that sell their knowledge. My dad was like, you know what? If I am helping out these farmers, and I do whatever it takes. And I remember being a little boy standing behind the park counter, and he'd say to a farmer, you know what? I don't know. He would be honest. I'm not sure. This is what I think it is. But if you can give me a little bit of time, let me find out. I'll call you. Because back then there's no cell phones. We're talking in the early 80s,
So
right? Late 70s,
truly
right?
resourceful people, truly
Yeah, he
resourceful
would help people.
are always like that. Truly resourceful people see, there are two kinds of people. There are people, three actually. The first category is people who are not resourceful at all. They are perpetually dependent on acquisition of objects in their life.
They're materialistic.
They live only to accumulate resources, and they lead very, very stressful lives because they are perpetually anxiety ridden, because deep down in their hearts, they know that the things that they are acquiring will disappear, and they don't know whether they'll be able to get it back again. So they are always anxious and stressed out, this first group. The second group are people who are not they are resourceful by accident. They don't really have a command of their resourcefulness. They accidentally become resourceful, and therefore their resourcefulness manifests like once in a while. Once in a while they are resourceful, and then they clutch to the things that they create during their episode of resourcefulness. I call it that they are accidentally resourceful. So they behave like as if whatever they created was like a lottery ticket, like they just won the lottery once, and they don't have any idea whether they're ever going to win it again. And so they clutch at it. So they're also quite anxious, but they're a little less anxious in the first category, but they are not truly resourceful. The second category of people are usually mean. The first category are anxious and mean, and they never share anything. The second category will share some of it, but they are always trying to finagle some advantage for themselves out of it. So they'll create something, and then they'll say, okay, I got this. You can have some of it, but what are you going to give me back in return? That kind of thing. The first category will not even give away this. They'll say, no, and and what have you got? Let me take that too. So that is the first category. The second category, they feel that they can create some stuff, and they'll say, yeah, but what are you going to give me in return? So they have a transactional way of living. All right. The third category of people are the truly resourceful people. These people, they are intentionally resourceful. They actually know that they are resourceful. They are confident about their resourcefulness. They know how to be resourceful. They know what the source of their resourcefulness is. They are able to tap into it at will. And when they do that, they live lives of abundance because they give, because they have no fear that they can create again. They have no feeling that what they can get more of. The whole universe is their personal treasure trove, their personal vault, which they can go and pull out things that they want and give to the rest of the world. This third category of people, they are truly blessings to humanity. Because they really, really propel the world forward without any residue of restriction or limitation on their givingness. And your father falls into that third category, but that is what I mean by these three categories of people. And the thing that one more thing that really helped me was, in addition to this tenacity that you described, I have a very good memory, almost a photographic memory. So when, for example, in Active Power, what happened was, when we first started the company, we wanted to manufacture it, but we weren't confident that we could set up a manufacturing facility ourselves. So we were going to try to get it to be manufactured for us by a different company in India. So I went on a trip to India to negotiate the terms. So the bottom line was that that company did not give us the terms we wanted. But in the process of negotiation, I did a tour of their company. So I walked through their assembly line and things like that. And they didn't let me take any photographs, but I photographed it here. So when I came back and when negotiations fell through, I said, it's okay. I think I can build the assembly line ourselves. We can build it ourselves. And I told my team what to do. And I built it out of memory of what I saw in their company.
Wow. Good for you.
So that really helped too. So resourcefulness does require some gifts that you have, but even if you don't have those kind of gifts, if you are truly resourceful, it is an attitude inside you, and you can pretty much live a life of intense creativity and abundance.
My dad was exactly what you talked about. He was I never really thought about it, but he had a photographic memory. My dad is in his 80s, and he will meet people and still remember their name. And it might be 20 years ago that he's seen him. They might have been a farmer that dealt with him for a few years. It might have been somebody he met. He was very, I guess, like a human recorder, like you said, very good memory. He's very good with numbers, very good with math. He didn't, he was the type of person back. I know some of the people listening to my show wouldn't understand this, but counting change. And here's what I mean. Some farmers would come in, they'd charge their stuff, right? Sign a bill. Other ones would come in with money and they'd pay, and I'd have to give change. And if I took the change and just dumped it into their hands, my dad would get very disappointed. Like he wouldn't yell at me. My dad wasn't that type of person. He'd just go, "What are you doing? That's not what you do. You count out the change. If it's, $14.86, you're going to give them 4 pennies. You're going to, you know what I mean? And you're going to count it out." And if I looked at, let's say I had a bill, I wrote all the parts down because he was teaching me how to be a partsman. Originally, I started in the back with the mechanics, and he brought me up front, read down all the parts, put all the numbers, and I go to grab a calculator. And he'd say, no. You look at the farmer, let's say the farmer's name was Joe. "Hey, Joe, you got a minute? I'm trying to teach my son." "No problem, Ray. Go ahead." I'd have to add it up.
Yeah.
10 numbers, 8 numbers, 5 numbers, didn't matter. And he wanted me to think. He wanted to think with my head, because he always said, it's good to have the resources, but you have to be able to use your head. And if you can use your head and then understand the resource, you're going to be more effective than the person that just runs and grabs with the resource, grabs that resource. So he was truly resourceful. And guess what? I learned from him.
Yeah.
I learned from him. I didn't realize as a young kid, I used to think to myself, I just want to go and do this and that. Why you make me do all this extra effort? Why can't I take the easy way out? And isn't that society, though? The people that you talked about, those 3 levels, number 1, 2, and 3. Number 1, and not resourceful, and then number 2, resourceful once in a while, accidental. Those people are never true leaders of society. A true leader of society would be my dad, who started out as one of 18 kids, which he was, learned how to be resourceful within 18 kids, learned how to start his own business with a few dollars in his pocket, learned how to help farmers. And what he is as a person still today, I see that, how it's spread out. And where I'm still in my home community, I'll go visit and we'll be out and about, and somebody will come up and we'll be at a restaurant or whatever, and they'll come and talk to him, and there's always positive stories they're telling me. Your dad did this and this and that, and you couldn't figure out, what I mean? That is a true leader of society, and who I still, to this day, till I take my last breath, aspire to be, is that truly resourceful person that wants to serve humanity. But I have to serve me by constantly having that tenacity to want to learn, because how can I serve others if I'm not always trying to be the best version of myself?
That's right. That's right.
Right.
But
go on.
If your vision is always centered on your purpose, then automatically whatever comes out is the best version of yourself.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. Yeah, my version of continuing to get better really started in 2020 during the lockdown when I created the Give a Heck brand. Like, my business has been around this is my 21st year. And being a serial entrepreneur, I felt like I was on a hamster wheel, even though I was helping people with their, lifestyle coaching, helping them with their finance, with their investments and stuff. I felt stuck. And in 2020, somebody said, "Why aren't you utilizing your last name? Your last name's Heck." And we started, right. And that's my legal last name. And that's what my brand ended up becoming, Give a Heck. And it is now 3 years young. And it's all about serving and bringing people to the masses that can make a true difference in their thought process, their mindset. Maybe people listening to this right now, listening to Ravi speak and listening to what you're talking about, you're going to be that small little spark that they've never had between their eyes, that catalyst to develop and climb in their lives. And that's the whole idea of life. For me, my purpose is to give a heck about others. I've always been doing it, but I've never been vocal enough. I've never stood outside of the shadow of others or brought myself into the light and said, "Hey, look at me. I can be resourceful. I am resourceful. I'm going to help you. I'm going to do whatever. And I'm going to quit being scared, of that imposter syndrome." Right?
Yeah. I mean, the imposter syndrome is universal, and that's because the inner me in each one of us knows the limitations of our own self far more than anybody else knows, and therefore we always wonder if we'll ever be up to the task. But eventually you learn to put that aside and just focus on vision and purpose, and let vision and purpose dictate what is the real you that manifests. The imaginary you is a bunch of opinions. The real you is what actually translates into true experience and action.
Yeah, like people. This is in my book, and I've talked about this in on stages before. The committee of they, right? Society, you are the committee of they, right? You are the person that's looking at me and saying, "I should do this, I should do that." Or you're looking at a group of people and saying, "They did this and they did that." You're constantly pointing the finger back to, like they say, three are pointing back, and you're never being resourceful to figure out, well, I see a problem. What can I do? What can I do as an individual or with a group of people to better or make a change? I'm not going to let the committee of they control my decisions. I'm going to be a resourceful person and go out, find a solution so that I can better them, which betters me. But the committee of they is something every single day. Criticism in social media where people criticize things, polarizing opinions about stuff. There's never ever 100% positive to something that's going on, a reaction. There's always somebody that's going to criticize it. They're going to think they know your life better. And you know what I say to people now, Ravi? I teach this to people all the time. It kind of, they'll look at me and they'll say, maybe they're talking to me about a friend or something that I've done or whatever, and they're venting and they're just puking all over me. And I'll look at them and you know what? And I'll say it very kind. You know what? I hear what you're saying, but that sounds like a you issue. And I just stop. And you wouldn't believe people are fumbling over their words, or they don't know how to respond to something because they're hoping people are reactionary. They're reacting to things that their lives suck and behind. They don't like their life. They're on that hamster wheel, go to work, go home, get paid. They don't like what's happening within their walls of their life. So they puke on other people. They live on the drama of controversy because then they don't have to deal with their own garbage. Right?
So
They don't go on.
when I was a teenager, my grandfather kind of got me to see this. So I was a 14-year-old kid in high school, and one year all my best friends moved to a different school. There was a new teacher in my class who kind of hated me. And so my school life suddenly overnight became really miserable. So I was pretty upset about it. And 14 years old, everything is larger than life. Everything is the end of the world. So the midst of this, my grandfather visited us, and after dinner, he said, "Hey, I'm going to go on my after dinner walk. Ravi, you want to join me and give me some company?" So yeah. So I was walking, the two of us walking down, and a little distance, he says, "What's bothering you?" And I said, "No, nothing's bothering me." He said, "Ah, no, 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 I know something's bothering you. You're awfully quiet. What's going on?" So then I started telling him how my life sucked, how I hated school, and so on and so forth. So he listened to it, and when I finished, he said, "You finished?" I said, "Yeah." "All right, then I want you to do something. I want you to look at those stars above. I want you to tell your complaints to the stars. Tell it loudly to the stars. But just like the way you told me, tell it loudly." So I looked at him and said, "Oh man, the old man's losing it." But then I thought that I couldn't really do anything. I was I respected him, so I started telling it speaking to the stars. Initially a little softly, but later on I became more enthusiastic about it and loudly telling all my complaints to the stars. So I finished it. Yes, and I stopped and I said, "You finished?" "Yeah." "Now what?" So he says, "I want you to look at those stars very carefully and tell me what they're going to be doing with your problems." He says, "What do you mean what they're going to be doing? The stars aren't going to do anything with the problems. Nobody cares. The whole world doesn't care." He says, "Nobody's going to do anything." He says, "Ravi, do you see the benign indifference with which the universe considers your problems?" So I was shocked. He says, "For me, my problems were the biggest thing." And suddenly he says, "The whole world doesn't care. What are you all caught up about your problems?" And then he said, "Ravi, I want you to know this. When the sun shines or when the rain falls, the sun is not shining to make the trees grow or the fruit ripen, and neither is it shining to cause drought and famine. And when the rain falls, it is not falling to water the grass or make the flowers bloom, and it is not falling to cause floods, death, and devastation. All that the sun is doing is shining, and all that the rain is doing is falling. It is we who make a story out of it." Yeah, I said, and he says, "When it is you who make the story, why do you make miserable stories?"
Good advice.
And my grandfather did something that day. He separated human consciousness for me very clearly into experience and into narrative. That's what we are. All of us live life, we experience something, and then we have a story about what we experience. Even now, when I'm talking to you, you are hearing me, but that is your experience, but there is something else. You are hearing what you are saying about what I am saying. So that narrative that is going on in your head is actually the real conversation that you are listening to. And this is the reason why one person will speak to three people, and each one of those three people will listen and understand that same statement in three different ways. And then when those three people repeat that same statement, it'll come out in three more different ways, such that that one statement now has multiplied into 6 presentations, into 6 different narratives. So this is the fundamental, what I call the sensory storm of life. Where you have experience is one thing. Narrative is one thing else. Both go side by side, like front and back of the same hand, but they are two separate things. Happiness, joy, freedom, expansion is only in the experience, not in the story. The narrative, the story you say about what you experience, is always in the past. It is always after the fact. It is always looking in the rearview mirror. Living life, the people who live life live more in the experience and less in the narrative. And one more thing that they all have in common, they have great power in choosing what narrative they choose to give power to. They decide the story of their life. And some of them are so good that they decide not only their story, but the story of people around them. See, the reason why I wrote the book was because I needed to have the story of the pandemic evolve and tell the story of how it impacted the actual people on the ground. There are a lot of people writing about the pandemic, and they're all writing about the Wuhan lab leak and the science of the vaccine or the science of the virus. And their books are more like medical textbooks than truly a story. There is no one out there actually telling a story of the mother who died and left behind 2 children. There is nobody out there telling a story of the wife who was locked with an abusive husband during a lockdown, who had to hide a broken wrist because the husband pushed her down the stairs. There is no one telling the story of a child who lost both father and mother because the pandemic selectively killed adults more than children. And now the child is an orphan with no income and is grabbed up by human trafficking and driven into prostitution. Nobody says these stories. But that is the true tragedy of the pandemic. Not some idiot in North Carolina, some scientist in North Carolina collaborating with another scientist in New York, collaborating with a third scientist in Wuhan, and collectively engineering a virus that potentially unleashed a pandemic that killed 25 million. People don't understand the power of stories. And that is the real reason why this story needs to be told. And the only people who can tell it are the storytellers, the writers, the authors, the podcasters, the screenplay writers, the screenwriters, the directors, the movie producers. These are the people who can make the lessons of the pandemic live forever. Otherwise, this will be one more event that gets lost in the shuffle of life,
of course,
in the dustbin of history.
I share about the pandemic. My daughter is a nurse, and she worked in an ICU unit in a city called Calgary, south of here, where she dealt with it. It was a COVID ICU unit, and she would call me crying because, for an example, a father got her to hold the phone to do a FaceTime to his wife and daughter to say goodbye to him, and an hour and a half later he was dead, and they weren't allowed to go see him. And stories like that I share because people need to understand it was real, whether or not you believe in masks, no masks, vax, no vax, that there was consequences. It was happening. People were dying. My daughter was scarred by it, and she still is today. It affected her 2 years of doing that, so much so that she's contemplated quitting nursing. It caused so much mental stress on her. The medical community and what it did to, they're the ones that were, parents, family standing at the glass, if they were even that lucky to look into a room, not allowed to go in, and her in full PPE holding that person's hand and then passing away, right?
Yeah.
It was a reality. It really was, people that are listening. And, your choices, whether or not I agree with them or not. Like, again, vax, no vax, mask, no mask, doesn't change the fact that the human condition, people were dying. Like you said, 25 million people. People were getting left behind. I know families, like one of my friends, his dad passed away from COVID. And people were saying at that time, oh, if you're perfectly healthy and you work out and your nutrition is 100%, you're going to survive COVID. So guess what? He was all of that stuff in his early 50s, and in my age category, died from COVID. But yet other people that are friends with him and myself,
Yeah,
in denial.
there
Oh,
is a lot of
it wasn't COVID. It's all a cover up. Right? You know what I mean? Like, it's just sad, the state of our world, that people can't have their opinion. Like, okay, you don't believe in it, great, but have some compassion. The guy lost his dad. Like,
yeah,
it's sad.
exactly. Yeah.
Right. So anyway, I want to get on to this because we could have a podcast for the whole day. I love this. Having a conversation with you is very enlightening, and it's I really appreciate it. Just so you know. So
Yeah.
let's go on. I want to go on to the next thing here, and it's back to this is one thing I really want to focus on for the last part of the podcast. You wrote a book titled, as you mentioned, about your book, The Reaper's Dance: 1,000 Days of COVID. The Reaper's Dance puts you in a ringside seat to the horror of the COVID pandemic, the calculations of men and women who were in positions to influence the fate of millions, a science that might have unleashed the pandemic and the science that saved the world. From the failures of governments and leaders to the triumphs of individual men and women, The Reaper's Dance is a story of complex and compelling tapestry of human hubris and humility, courage and cowardice, with an enduring cautionary message for all humankind. Why write a book about COVID when it's such a sensitive subject? Like, you've talked a little bit about it, but why put yourself in that position? And how has it been received thus far since the book has come out?
All the reviews have been fantastic. They're on Amazon. It's been on Amazon, and everyone who has read the book has written saying that they were profoundly moved by it. The common words that they use to describe their experience is, it's gripping, it's unputdownable. They can't stop reading it from the first page, that it sucks them right in. And then even though there is science in it, but they are not able to stop it. And they are able to read through it. It's light and easy and flows easy. So those are common descriptions of everyone who has read it so far, and they are both friends, families, and people who have no knowledge of. They all come forth with the same descriptions or similar themes across the board. Why I wrote the book? Very simple. My life, like I told you in the beginning, it has been about the human condition, and during the pandemic, I saw that my work of 40 years were being pulled and ripped apart by forces that are threatening our society, that divisive, very fractured fault lines that are tearing back the community of humans that we exist. Everyone is being polarized into tribes and camps. And my father once told me long ago that the evil has no power except what it receives from the silence of the good. And that means that if I have the capacity and the power to say something about it, I should say something about it. And so I decided to write my experience, but I decided to write our experience of the actual human impact of the pandemic, not the glossed over scientific, intellectual. I didn't want, see, like I said before, there are quite a few books on the intellectual, scientific reasons of the pandemic. Books that describe the virus, describe the epidemiology, describe the possibility of why viruses move, and they are intellectual and what I call intellectual acts of autoeroticism, basically just intellectual masturbation. And they don't really help bring home the real lessons of the pandemic, which is human beings suffered and human beings triumphed. And the reasons they suffered needs to be told. The reasons why that suffering was not necessary to happen needs to be told. And the reasons how they triumphed also needs to be told. Because there will be other pandemics.
Of course,
And
yeah.
if these lessons are not learned, we will lose our way again. So unless the story of human suffering, the human frailty and frivolity is not told, and also unless the story of human ingenuity, in human courage and human compassion is not told, we will not be able to find our way out of the next pandemic. That is the reason why I wrote the book.
And we have to be, like you said, evil will always win if the good sit back and are quiet. And I look at what's happened, like one of the things I wrote down here was so easy for the governments to control the world during COVID, right? It really was. And a lot of it had to do with that, the media and governments were parlaying and working on people's fear. There was not really a lot of okay, everybody, this is what's going on. Let's go through it and let's figure this out together. Everything was always reactionary, which got people even more scared, which got them living like those out of that 3 steps you talked about. There was most of the population was stuck in one. There was no resourcefulness for them to even not necessarily find a cure or make a difference in what people were going through. Their resourcefulness of actually thinking about what's going on, what's being said, what is being communicated with me, using something that lacks today in our society, which is common sense, right? We just don't have enough of it.
Yeah. So the nature of power has only one reason and modus operandi, and that is the furtherance of power. So what happens is governments and their primary goal is power, and their secondary goal is governance. So usually when in crisis, everyone always defaults to their primary goal. So what happens is governments operate to consolidate power, and they do that by manipulating conversation. They do that by manipulating the dominant narrative, because they know that the world lives in a narrative. Not to people experience the experience, but they actually live in the narrative. Not many people live in the experience. So anyone who controls the narrative controls the way people will experience whatever they live in. And this is what governments do. It is necessary for people of integrity and vision to step forward and craft a narrative that can dominate the conversation. And that is what this book and my work is all about. In fact, my work is not just over, it has just started. This work that I started is going to continue in other fields, but from this moment onwards, I'm fairly mature in my life career, that I can now focus on what I call the second act. And my second act is this. I'll continue to be a physician, but my second act is, how do I craft the narrative that allows society to have an expansion in the way they experience life? And that's it.
That's great. And, bottom line, we need people such as yourself to continue to, not necessarily think outside the box. You've been doing that as far as I can tell since you were a young lad. we need people to put it down in on paper, like you did with your book, being willing to go on podcasts and share. And it's not always the popular thing that people want to hear. There'll be people that will see that there was anything to have as a conversation about COVID, and they won't listen to my podcast, even a loyal listener. And I'm okay with that, because I can't please the masses. I'm trying to please I always focus in life. My dad always would talk about the fact, that customer coming in the door, that is the person, that one person you're looking to support, that one person that we're going to make a difference. We're not worried about the person that's left, and not worried about the next person that's coming in. Always worry about serving the one. And if you serve the one well, they're going to go out and they're going to be happy. Their home life, they're going to take home that happiness. Their coworkers, maybe their own business. And if you do a good job, you can help one person at a time by, and I was shocked how much I'm not saying those are how he worded it, but that's what he taught me. That's how he'd craft things. And that's the interpretation. Now, as an adult in my 50s, I look back to the late 70s, early 80s, and what my dad taught me was how to serve people, how to always be tenacious, be resourceful. And, I feel it's my responsibility now that it's taken me, I'm not saying I've learned a lot of stuff. I figured out a lot of this stuff over the last 15, 20 years of how much I learned from my father. But now that I've learned that, crafted it within my own structure of my life, created my Give a Heck brand, it's my responsibility, I believe, to go out and pass that on, that one person at a time.
Yes.
Yeah. Right.
I get it.
So one of the last things I want to ask you, and then we're going to wrap up. Ravi, what do you see as the greatest challenge for humanity today?
The greatest, I have spoken about this earlier, and somebody else, is the us versus them kind of mentality. And that essentially is the greatest challenge. How do you get people to start seeing beyond themselves and actually experience life as a connected experience? How do you see that? If a lot of people talk about it, it's very easy to talk about. It's harder to live it. But when you do live it, it becomes extremely powerful and extraordinarily liberating. And my own experience of this is the only way to get people to see it is to live it yourself. And if you live it yourself as a connected being, then people who come into your sphere of influence experience that expansion themselves. And to that extent, it is like your father. I will work to impact one person at a time. And because of that one person, the world will get impacted. There's a Jewish proverb. It's a quotation from Schindler's List, the movie. And he says, I think it is Liam Neeson who plays Oscar Schindler in that movie. And he says that I should have done more. I should have saved more. I could have saved more. And there is a Jewish concentration camp survivor. He says there is a line in Jewish scripture that says, if you save one man, it is equal to having saved the whole world. So the greatest problem there is this lack of connection. But if you can connect with one person, then you have started a process that will connect the whole world.
You and I talking is that connection too.
Yes, and that automatically becomes a connection that goes to the whole world. And it's the only distinction is it's a matter of time. See, until that one connection happens, before that one connection happens, it is a never possibility. But the minute it happens, it has happened once, and therefore it becomes possible. And once it becomes possible for one, it becomes possible for the entire world.
It's true. So many, those listening, watching, rewinding to listen to this part, the whole podcast, there's so many fantastic nuggets of knowledge that Ravi has shared with us all that, never think that you can't be that one person that can make a difference.
Yes.
No matter how minute it is, it could be just you changing your attitude and understanding how to be grateful about what you have and not always searching for that next promotion, that next new vehicle, that next new shiny, object syndrome that a lot of people suffer with. Be kind, be grateful. What can I learn today? Maybe you're doing something as simple, people listening, next time you go to a store, whether it's a drive-through or you go into a store, smile and be genuine and ask the person with genuine heart, how are you today? Or, wow, that's a nice tie you're wearing. Wow, that's a nice necklace you're wearing. You have a great smile. Has anybody ever told you that? And you have just made a difference in somebody's life. And
Yep.
something that is so simple. It didn't cost you anything except to be kind. So that's my advice to people. Don't ever think you can't make a difference. Immediately, right after you stop listening to this podcast, go over to even your significant other, somebody you work with, and just say something kind. Make sure it's genuine though, right? Nothing worse than people that are a facade and being phony. So I appreciate you, my friend. If you had to give our listeners one last closing message, what would you tell them in regards to giving a heck and never giving up?
Stay connected. You can follow me in my continued journey in this process at my website. It's www.driyer.com. It's easy. You will be able to see my writings, my blogs, which I'm going to continue, my new book projects on autism and neurodiversity. And I'm writing a book on, it's called Tales from Nana's Kitchen, which is herbal remedies and recipes that my grandma used to make to keep us kids healthy when we were kids. So stuff like that. I'll be always writing and speaking and talking in podcasts at events, and they're always going to be in topics like the stuff that we talked about today. So you can stay connected and write back to Doug as well as me at any time. We'll be happy to write back to you.
Get on. Fantastic. I'll make sure that for those new to the show, go to giveaheck.com, go into the podcast portal, and you will be able to find the show notes and links on how to get a hold of Ravi. Purchase his book. I actually last night went on and I purchased Audible. I read so much stuff in my business. I read so much stuff in my business, in my finance business. To actually read a book puts me to sleep, because I do so much reading that when I pick up the book and I start reading, I just nod off. And I found the most effective for me over the last, I don't know how many books I've listened to. I have an Audible subscription. So last night, I went and researched your book, and I looked up on Amazon. I wanted to grab a little bit of some clips that I actually talked about. Yeah. And oh, cool. He's actually got it on Audible. So I bought it right away. I'm looking forward to start listening to it actually within the next 24 hours, because the Reaper's Dance, the 1,000 Days of COVID, is going to touch so many people's lives. Yes, there'll be a lot of people that won't want to listen to it, won't want to listen to this podcast, but I'm a person that seeks knowledge and understanding to constantly keep myself, my mental state of mind, non-camped and on the climb. So thank you so much. Again, listeners, I'll make sure that information's in the show notes. Like Ravi said, you can reach out to him. The best thing that we can do in our lives is to have conversations like this, not to be the silent masses, so that, as Ravi mentioned, evil can take over. right? We need to be out there having a voice. Our one voice does matter.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So our time is almost up. You've already explained to people about what, you know, how to reach out to you. Again, I'll make sure it's in the show notes. So anything last comment you want to say before I wrap up the show?
Oh, it has been a pleasure. I look forward to hearing from you as to how this was received with in your audience. I hope it makes an impact. And contrary to most notions, the Reaper's Dance is, yes, it is about COVID, but it is not about COVID. It is actually about human people.
Yeah, the human condition. Yeah, the actual,
Yeah.
you know, good thing you brought that up. It is about, there's stories about it. It's not the scientific, as you've mentioned. It's more, you know,
it
what
is about,
has happened and
how,
what transpired.
How ordinary people weathered some really hard times, and what it impacted in their. So you would probably find it more interesting than a book that is just sitting there doing a blame and shame kind of thing.
Well, stories are the most impactful and powerful when it centers around the human condition and about, you know, the human heart and what people have transpired. Like I said, I know what I went through with my daughter and what she went through, and other people in the medical community, other clients of mine, and, you know, other doctors that I know. It's real, it's impactful for those stories to be shared. So again, thanks for writing the book. I am so excited to actually, like I said, listen to it. Of course, I'll make sure I do a review for you. That's one of the things that frustrates me. I get lots of people that read my book, but yet very few people. It's hard to get people to do a review. I don't understand. It's not that hard. They don't like, the more people that review it, the more that it gets out there.
It gets out there, yeah.
The algorithm. So thanks so much for being on Give a Heck, Ravi. I appreciate your time and sharing some of your experiences so that others too can learn it is never too late to give a heck. Thank you for taking time out of your day and listening to Give a Heck. If you find value, I'd appreciate you sharing with your friends and family so they too can learn how to live life on purpose, not by accident. So you do not miss the next episode, please subscribe on your favorite podcast platform, and please also post a review. I look forward to reading your comments. This has been Dwight Heck. If you want to check out other podcast episodes or today's show notes, please check out my website, giveaheck.com. And until next time, together let us all strive to give a heck.